ArizonaNORML chapter meeting. We're going to kick things off here with some national updates. Then we're going to pivot over and do a little update on what's happening with state politics over the last month. And then we'll close out the public recorded portion of our meeting with Allison Stein doing some updates. But before we get a whole lot further here, let's go ahead and dive into national updates. Really big news happening right now, as we were talking about before the recording kicked in. A state is voting today to legalize adult use marijuana. That's Oklahoma. What that will do is allow for lawful possession, personal cultivation. There is home grow in this initiative. It'll create a retail marketplace, and it will also provide for, as in Arizona, expungement as well as resentencing, which is, I think, a little bit newer for Oklahoma. So I was checking out the polling and the incoming election results on my way over here. It was looking off the tee like we were going to have a massive landslide no, just with a few votes coming in. It's been evening out a little bit. Last time I saw, about 10 or 15 minutes before I walked in here, it was about a 20-point spread. It had been about a 35-point spread, so that's closed a lot, but it's not looking too great. And Oklahoma, I would say, has a lot of unique issues that aren't in play in other states. That's something we were just talking about again before the meeting really kicked off. Very open market in Oklahoma, no limits on licensing at all. And as a result of that, there's ended up being a lot more licensees than their medical marijuana authority, as they call it out there. And that's a topic we'll circle back to in a little bit later about Arizona Department of Health Services and boards. But there is not enough employees of the authority to go ahead and do all of the inspections. So believe it or not, last time I heard, there was, I think it was a 5-year backlog of places that hadn't been inspected. And that's just kind of bewildering and has led to a lot of obviously negative headlines being splashed across newspapers in Oklahoma about basically just unregulated cannabis because there aren't enough regulators. So I think this one, we'll see what happens. I'm still, hopeful this will end up going in consumers' favor out there, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. I wouldn't read too much into it if this one fails, because again, there's just very unique issues at play in Oklahoma. For example, they just put a pause on issuing new licenses while they're also rolling out this initiative. So it's a very strange, unusual set of facts there. But anyway, that's Oklahoma. Keep posted. I think we'll check one more time before we head out of here to see if there are any breaking updates that we can report. But turning to new research happening across the country, there's a lot of new studies that have come out this month. I'm going to cruise through some of those. Joint replacement patients consuming medical marijuana recover more quickly. Folks with tinnitus have been found to have a reduction in symptoms when they consume cannabis. There's also, interestingly, a study finding an association between the legalization of marijuana and decreased DUI fatalities resulting from alcohol. So that suggests that people are switching off of alcohol over to cannabis and acting more responsibly. Other breaking research, topical CBD has been found to speed the healing of canker sores. Don't know if that applies to anyone here. It's a little more common, I think, our colder weather neighbors up north. On top of that, we've got a study finding that medical marijuana lowers blood pressure, number one. Teen marijuana use has steadily declined over the past decade, showing that legalization measures do not, in fact, increase teen consumption. And finally, there's a new study, and this is also very topical for us, that cannabis mitigates treatment-resistant PTSD symptoms. This is a long line of research. Actually, I think we have new studies every single year that just show this further and further. We'll circle back to that later. There's a great bill that's going to add, hopefully add PTSD to the list of qualifying conditions. I don't want to completely add it without strings attached. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So other breaking, really important news that happened in the last month. A lot of folks have been waiting. I know our national organization has really been hitting the pavement extra hard in connection with President Biden's pardon announcement. This was announced way back in, it was, I think, October, right? And then just as of earlier this week, we can finally hop online and start applying for pardons. And by we, I mean the 6,500 people across the entire United States of America who qualify for one of those pardons. So probably no one in this room, but I've been surprised before. Also talking legalization, decriminalization. Interestingly, in Texas, there's a pair of cities that are going to be considering decriminalization measures later this year. San Antonio, I believe, is a ballot measure for May. I think it is May. San Antonio is also, Fort Worth is also considering decriminalization. Finally, something we were just chatting about a little bit before this kicked off. I was just kind of flipping through Google News and stumbled across a whole bunch of articles about this really interesting debate that's playing out in Ohio right now, where there's a bill underway that would dramatically expand the medical marijuana program, providing more dispensaries and more cultivation licenses. Predictably, the powers that be that have licenses are coming out in full force against this pro-consumer bill that would expand access, because they are concerned that there is too much wholesale supply, and that if we legalize more and allow more access, that of course there's going to be all this marijuana floating into the unregulated market, and God forbid that happen. So interesting. We've heard a lot of similar comments, by the way, out here in Arizona from folks about the wholesale market out here, and God forbid we let manufacturers get their own licenses and have some sense of agency and freedom to really pursue their dreams. So that's a little bit of an update on national news. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? AJ, go ahead.
Did you happen to see or hear about the fact that the federal court stated if you were a cannabis user, you could keep your firearms?
Oh, right.
And then just the other day, yesterday or Friday, the Department of Justice stated that they're going to appeal that ruling.
Oh, wow.
So
naturally they're going to. But well, yeah, I think I did hear about that, but I haven't read the whole opinion.
I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I know that they filed the appeal.
Yeah,
at the federal level.
Well, that's a really good update. I'll say that I think is like one of the top 3 issues among people that we speak to, especially when we're doing expungement clinics all over like rural Arizona. Like lots and lots of people care about that. We've talked about this before. I have attorneys at my law firm that really want to have consume cannabis and have a firearm, but they feel like based on the way the law is for them to especially like maintain good standing for their law degree, it's kind of like you have to pick Second Amendment or the right to consume, and you can't do both. And many of them are just picking the Second Amendment. I pick consumption. It is what it is. So thanks for that, AJ. Any other updates that folks have? This was a pretty long national update, so I think we're probably ready to go ahead and turn to state politics. So at this point in time, there are 3 marijuana bills that are really moving. One of those is a great new medical marijuana law that will reduce barriers for patients to access medical marijuana, number 1, and harmonize our adult use and medical laws a little bit more on the other hand, too. With respect to reducing barriers for patients, this bill is going to reduce the state licensing fee all the way from $150 down to $50. That's a 2/3 reduction. For a 2-year card, that's right.
Nice.
$25 a year. Yeah, incredible news. And on top of that, it's also going to allow for telehealth certifications to happen lawfully. There are some places doing them now at great risk to themselves and potentially to a degree the patients as well. So this would clearly allow telehealth certifications, create a real a regulatory regime to allow that to happen. And then finally, it would also add, in connection with reducing barriers at least, it would also add autism spectrum disorder and PTSD to the list of qualifying conditions. Importantly, in past bills and in Department of Health Services rules for autism spectrum disorder, they required patients to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. I think I'll have you come up here in a little bit, AJ, and provide some more color on that. PTSD was added through a court case, actually. The Department of Health Services refused to add it, and then a court forced them to, but it said that it only forced them to if they were seeking conventional treatment and marijuana on top of it. This bill would not do that. It would allow folks to clearly qualify for just PTSD and PTSD alone. With regards to harmonizing our laws, it'll import some of the advertising restrictions that will apply to adult use products, namely like don't advertise towards kids, trial-resistant packaging, all of that kind of stuff. Borrow those and import them into our medical marijuana law. Pretty good, I think, common sense measure that also makes the bill a little bit more palatable to some of the conservatives. So that bill passed out of the Senate just last week. It passed out of committee a couple of weeks before that, the Health and Human Services Committee. If anyone's interested, I would encourage you to hop online and watch that video, Senate HHS on Valentine's Day. We spent our entire Valentine's Day down at the Capitol for all you folks. And AJ was part of that, Allison was part of that. And I think, AJ, do you want to come up maybe and talk a little bit about autism and maybe talk a little bit about your testimony and the exchange that you had with, for example, Senator Wadzak and Senator Borelli?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
John did a phenomenal job down at the state capitol as well. So he represented very well, and he's being modest, and he actually killed a bad bill.
We'll get there.
We'll talk about it, but just wanted to give him the accolades that he deserves. But in SB 1466, it adds autism as a list of qualifying conditions. Previously, the bill we've attempted to get it added several times in the past, and it's been so restricted that it has not been usable at all. It's particularly for children. parents of autistic children, it's required that you see a doctor monthly, they do prescriptions, and just this whole regulation that was just completely unfeasible for parents of autistic children. So now the language has been streamlined down to the fact that basically if they have a clinical diagnosis of autism per a licensed psychologist that is authorized to do so, or a medical physician that is auzed to do so, you're good to go and you qualify.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taken out a lot of the other BS language that was completely ridiculous. I did testify on this part. I'm the father of 2 autistic children. And during this conversation that I had with the senators during the committee, it was evident. One of them, Senator Wadsack, actually is a special needs parent as well, and she was extremely interested in what I had to say, and which was refreshing. And it was amazing that they were mostly on board. And most of the senators had great questions. The interaction was good. And even Senator Borelli was basically trying to get it out of me based on my previous law enforcement experience. Like, have I ever had any issues with anybody that's ever smoked weed, and trying to get him into the car? So it was an open and friendly discussion, particularly with the Republican lawmakers. It was actually surprisingly open and
really good,
surprisingly friendly, and intelligent questions were asked. So as opposed to the typical no that we get. So we made it out of committee, made it out of the Senate, and over to the House now on that particular bill.
Yep.
So.
And let me add some more color to AJ's comments on the bill and the exchange that happened up there. So I've been looking forward to seeing AJ in this kind of a venue, candidly, for quite some time, as our ArizonaNORML's Republican State Committee person whose dad was worked in the DEA task force, military veteran, Department of Public Safety himself. And it was just really fascinating. And I'm so proud of AJ, I got to say, first of all, but really fascinating to watch the back and forth. AJ mentioned Senator Borelli. Senator Borelli is traditionally one of the bigger opponents of marijuana reform in the past. He is a proponent of the Hemp Act, and he would advocate for rope, not dope. Very against, especially adult use. Really not very favorable towards medical marijuana. Hates the industry with a passion, and this is an industry bill, albeit one that we've been doing a lot of negotiation on to do things like drop the bad language that AJ was talking about, and a variety of other things. So Borelli, he went up to AJ and asked, thanked him for his service, of course, asked what branch he served with, and then asked, have you ever had to wrestle a drunk into a car before? And AJ, I think, caught off guard for a second.
Yeah, I didn't understand what he was asking, and then I was like, oh yeah, okay, he's asking about arresting people. Okay, yeah, I got it.
He said, every single night I had to wrestle a drunk into a car.
Yes.
And then Borelli says, what about with cannabis? Do you ever have to wrestle someone who was stoned into a car? And AJ said, 0.000 times in all of my years on the force. And Borelli looked like he was kind of surprised by that answer. Like, I think he probably assumed that it would be more common for alcohol than cannabis, but he was surprised that it was never. And he's kind of like, huh? And then AJ, he commented like, well, sir, it would be, it's a lot more helpful and easier when there's a bag of Funyuns in the back of the car. And then the entire committee room of the legislature just burst out laughing. It was incredible. But to also linger a little bit more on what AJ said about Senator Wadsack's comments, I think this just really floored me. I saw her responses to our 2020 candidate guide and have been looking forward to really getting to have a conversation with her for a long time. But the comments she made were just unbelievable. Probably some of the best comments I've ever heard any legislator make in the legislature. For example, there was a question that was asked to AJ about data to back up this bill and the benefits for autism. And the next speaker had all of the data. So AJ was providing more anecdotal evidence. Justine Wadsack jumped in immediately, and she's like, I'm the mother of a special needs child myself. When the diagnosis happened 10 years ago, I spent a lot of time doing the research. I know people that were moving to Colorado so they could use full spectrum oil, and it significantly benefited them. And after the exchange with Borelli, again, Senator Wadsack came to AJ's defense to reinforce the validity of everything he said. And she goes, I've spoken with doctors and nurses in emergency rooms, and what they tell me is that almost everyone who's there for DUIs and for domestic violence, they're there for alcohol. No one's ever there for marijuana when it comes to domestic violence or alcohol. And we're all just sitting there like, wow,
we know
that just happened. And we know, and it's obvious, but
it's a little bit even more ironic because she's a Republican senator.
Right. She's a Republican, a pretty far right Republican senator, really. But when it comes to cannabis, she's phenomenal. And we spoke with her in the hallway for a little while afterwards, and she was saying that when she was on her campaign, she was running in a district a little bit north of Tucson, kind of a little bit of a rural-ish kind of area. And she said she got a lot of flack from people, from Republican voters about her stance on marijuana. And she's like, well, that's who I am. And I could have backed down, but no, it's not the right thing to do. I believe in the benefits of medical marijuana and I believe in freedom. So instead of changing who I am or muting myself, I went out and educated those folks because they should agree with me too. So I really just can't speak highly enough of her in particular, really of how just that whole discussion went. Senator Janae Shamp was also made some really good comments too. She's a nurse and seems to be someone who's pro-cannabis, but not pro-Arizona Dispensaries Association corporate cannabis. And I'll add a little bit more color to that in a second, because I think we're probably ready, unless you want to talk maybe about add anything or talk about PTSD. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we'll go ahead, Michael, before we change
Just
subjects.
one little historical clip. This autism issue has been debated many times in previous years. 2 years ago, one of the opponents of the bill had the unbelievable arrogance as to stand up and say, we don't believe autism is an actual handicap, that autistic people can lead productive and happy lives without the necessity of medication. I have a severely autistic grandson who's 6'9" and 390 pounds. And anyone who's ever, I don't know if you would choose Drunken Hell's Angel over severely autistic child of equal size, but it is fascinating to see how the debate is evolving over time.
Agreed.
Like the whole story of cannabis, somehow reality is creeping in from people who are living through these things.
Agreed.
And have, the scientists and the politicians can try to paint this narrative that they're trying to sell, but there are people out there saying, out there in the real world, it's not like that. It's like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys keep swinging at them.
Thank you for that. And I think that's a really good point. And every year it does seem the legislature gets better. And I've got to say that I really think it's just more people are having personal experiences with marijuana, and even secondhand experiences with medical marijuana. They all just, we've all been sold a lie by Uncle Sam, which is that anyone who smokes pot is going to be unmotivated and be a loser and not be a productive member of society. And just when it comes down to it, we all know that's just totally false. And a lot of them don't know that because they haven't interacted with, high functioning and the right kind of consumers. They've just seen a stereotype on TV that was shoved down their throat by the media or by certain lobbyists or PR people. And then, for example, they have a brother that gets hit by a car and gets prescribed OxyContin and then kicks OxyContin within days through marijuana, never takes more oxys. They're like, wow, he seemed like he was doing fine when he was consuming. He was still a productive member of society. He could still have a conversation with me. I don't see the problem with this. It certainly seems a lot better than OxyContins, which are causing people to get addicted and die. So, that's one specific example, but there are just many, many others. Particularly, I feel like a lot of legislators on the Republican side of the aisle that are warming up to this a little bit more and more every year, especially medical marijuana.
I was just going to say, particularly the medical side. They're not so keen on the recreational side yet.
That's right.
But when the Republicans in medical is coming along.
I spoke with Representative Jones today about DCS reform, and she hates big pharma, and she's for medical marijuana.
Yep.
Anything that keeps money out of big pharma's pockets, she is for.
Yes, and that's another comment that Senator Watsack made almost under her breath at that hearing. It was like, big pharma grows out of the ground. Big pharma grows out of the ground. So yeah, folks are waking up to this. It's really, really encouraging for us. Like AJ and I were both cheesing on our way out of the Capitol. We're like, did that just happen? Like, we beat the bad bill and our good bill got through unanimously? Like, what just happened? So anyway, maybe on that note, it's a good time to pivot into the bad bill that we did kill at that committee. So
That was all John.
not all be. It's
Not all,
always a team effort.
But you're speaking.
Including team members that aren't here and are acting very much behind the scenes in a very helpful kind of a
We're
way.
still alive.
I know that.
Okay, just like
So one of the big debates in this legislative session involves hemp-derived products, particularly those that include certain kinds of cannabinoids that, depending on what you mean by intoxicated, might be mildly intoxicating. Arguably, CBD, I think, is mildly intoxicating. So there are these new products. This story kind of traces back to the 2018 Farm Bill. We legalized industrial hemp, which is defined to mean the cannabis sativa L plant with a delta 9 THC concentration of 0.3% or less, and all derivatives, extracts, and manufacturers of those industrial hemp plants. So at the time, I mentioned the phrase "rope, not dope." The idea is this is going to be like a purely textile kind of thing. A lot of research and development happened. Soon folks were extracting CBD, and that became one of the major hemp products. After that, folks started figuring out ways to convert CBD into other therapeutic substances such as delta 8 THC, delta 10 THC, delta 9 THC, HHC, et cetera, et cetera. There are some health risks that have been raised about these products, some of which may be valid. Namely, it's a conversion process. There's, when you make any kind of manufactured product, there are usually safer and more dangerous ways of manufacturing the product that can have more or less adulterants in it. There's also right now, these products are really existing in a totally unregulated kind of twilight zone. So there are no requirements for testing. Some of them I think are being tested, or any restrictions about using the safer manufacturing process as opposed to the other one, or what have you, or for example, prohibiting sales to children. So there is a little bit of a public policy problem, I think, to be solved with these hemp-derived products. The question is, how do we solve it? So the Arizona Dispensaries Association preferred solution is predictably that we should outlaw all of the unregulated market and let them sell the products that they allege are incredibly dangerous.
Well, when you put it like that.
Yeah. The other option is that we should just continue regulating hemp products through the Department of Agriculture, which has been regulating hemp products for the last 4 or 5 years at this point without having limited licensing. So the ADA will tell you, we've got to go and delegate this to the Department of Health Services to protect the kids. It's all about poison control, and poison control is upset. And we've got to give it to DHS. And then you ask them, like, why should we give it to DHS? Is DHS inherently better at testing? And we don't really get a very clear answer, but as all of you know from us talking about testing in the marijuana program, particularly last month, and we had a great exchange with Michael in particular, it's laughably absurd to believe that the Department of Health Services is inherently better at testing cannabinoid products than anyone else, let alone the Department of Agriculture, which has decades of experience testing pesticides, testing product recalls occasionally. So that's our position. The position of ArizonaNORML is we should be regulating to protect safety without taking economic opportunities away from entrepreneurs or taking choices away from consumers. For example, I don't know that I will buy any of these products that are Delta 8 hemp derived, Delta 10, Delta 9, whatever. But I'd certainly like to see entrepreneurs, especially lower or middle income entrepreneurs, or even higher income entrepreneurs that don't have $7 to $10 million lying around to buy a marijuana license, or $500,000 to $600,000 a year to pay to a dispensary to use their license. I think it's good to have some other kind of avenue for those folks to pursue their passion and start a real cannabis business involving products that have therapeutic properties. I also think from the consumer side of things, I might not personally want to buy any of these hemp-derived Delta 8, Delta 10 products, what have you, but I'm aware of what prices are being charged at dispensaries in Arizona compared to other states that have more competition. And I would certainly like dispensaries, whatever, to be thinking twice before they charge, for example, $40, $30 for a pack of edibles, when there's a smoke shop across the street that's selling a pack for $5 in an efficient marketplace where the price actually reflects the intersection of supply and demand. So that's a little bit about those two bills. The ADA's Outlaw the Unregulated Market bill was up the same day as the medical bill. So we were all out there for that too. Candidly, we thought their bill was going to pass. It was sponsored by the chair of the committee. And it's incredibly uncommon that a bill that's sponsored by the chair of the committee, who decides which other committee members' bills get heard, very rare that his bill dies. So we went in there and we're like, well, hopefully maybe 1 or 2 Democrats will vote no. And that'll send a message that this thing could be running into some problems when it gets to the floor. But remarkably, there was 1 Democratic no vote. All of the Republicans on the committee rebelled against the chair, which, again, doesn't happen. Senator Borelli in particular, I mentioned he's really kind of the founder of our state's hemp program in some sense, and has been lied to by the Arizona Dispensaries Association's lobbyists seemingly every single year for the last 5 years. And at this point is just not a very big fan of the industry. So lit into every single speaker that went up there. And then it was his turn to vote for the bill first. He goes pass, because he doesn't, like everyone else, doesn't want to vote against the bill that's sponsored by the chair of the committee. So next it goes over to Senator Birch, Eva Birch, Democrat out of Mesa. And she says, I have significant concerns about market power in the marijuana industry. I also have concerns about product not being tested well. I just don't feel good about this bill, and I've got to be a no. So then from there, the next person to explain their vote, I think, was Senator Janae Shamp, who we mentioned earlier. And she made a really just remarkable comment. I think many of you have heard us talk about vertical integration before, and we've had those discussions with you. Senator Shamp's comment was very unexpected and very interesting. She starts talking and she says, I've got to concur with the comments that were made by my colleague, Senator Birch. I am very concerned about vertical integration. I don't like vertical integration in healthcare, and I'm not liking what I see of it in the medical marijuana program, the marijuana programs. I also have concerns about testing. I've got to be a no. And then Borelli goes, he's a no. And then I think Watsack goes last, and she says, I've got great concerns. I'm also a no. It's maybe some good ideas there, but I don't feel good about this. So it's a no. So that ended that bill. I've heard whispers that it's trying to be resurrected in another committee in the House. We'll see what happens. There's new rules this year that make it hard to choose your committee when you try to resurrect a bill. Like, it's got to go to the most germane kind of subject matter committee. You would think then like this would go to Health and Human Services, probably not, for example, like Natural Resource. Well, I guess that's kind of related. So we're keeping an eye on all of that, feeling pretty cautiously optimistic we'll be able to head it off wherever it ends up popping up its head. But that's a little bit about the hemp bills. This has the good hemp bill has cleared the Senate. It's moved over to the Land, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs Committee in the House right now. We're embarked on an effort to kind of just go out and educate all the people in the legislature at this point, trying to get a vote as soon as we can, but we don't take risks. So we wait until we can count the votes and count the majority, and that's when the bill goes up for a vote. So we continue to monitor that every single week. And I think that's probably a wrap on hemp, unless you want to add some color that I left out.
Just
Sure.
this isn't
Yeah, we'll do
that big
questions
of a
too.
problem. I have a friend that owns a smoke shop, and she gets about 1 to 2 requests for meth pipes a week. And she's been open for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, and she's gotten maybe 2 requests the entire time she's been open for Delta 8.
Yeah.
So this isn't like a massive, like, I'm sure all of us here go to smoke shops. I don't see any Delta 8 at any smoke shops. It's not in any Circle K I've gone to recently. I really just feel that this is the ADA trying to pass the buck for their dispensaries not.
Yeah, I've seen it in one smoke shop ever. I've never seen it in a Circle K or any kind of a major brand store. We have talked about this issue here before, and I recall that no one was eager to go out and buy Delta 8 and Delta 10. And I'm not either, for that matter. Like I said before, it's not a question of like, we should be, forcing everyone to consume Delta 8 and Delta 10. No, we should let people make informed choices and educate them as to the risks that are there and what the products actually are. And if people want to buy them, they do. And if they don't, they don't. The businesses maybe don't exist. So I agree. It's not really a big thing that's out there. I think it's more of like a theoretical threat than anything else, and it's being blown way out of proportion. This has evolved and gotten very antagonistic, I think, over the last week, and we'll add some color on that in a little bit. But it seems like Allison said to be, I think, way out of proportion. With that, we'll do questions. I think I saw Michael's hand first, and then we'll go to you, Tina.
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I was rubbing my temple.
Gotcha.
I'm going to leap back into the quicksand on the synthetic cannabinoids issue. Spent the last month reading and researching.
Let me pause you. Let's circle back to that in the private discussion of
Right.
after we close this up.
Okay.
But I'm looking forward to those comments.
Sure.
So let's just touch then really quickly on one last bill. There's a bill in the House right now that would do 2 things in particular. One, it would create a residency requirement. So the idea there is we've all seen, for example, multi-state operators from other states come into Arizona's market and have increasing market share, whether it's Curaleaf or Trulieve or many others. The residency requirement would make it so only Arizonans can apply for future marijuana licenses in Arizona. So that's a general rough kind of statement of it. That's number one. Number 2, it would also create a marijuana regulatory board composed of a variety of different members who meet certain qualifications to be appointed by the governor, but only be removed for a cause. So that's a bill that we're also in support of right now. We're expecting a vote any day on it. And we're cautiously optimistic that it's at least moving in the right direction, albeit it's a bill we haven't really focused on all that much,
And
at
we
least
don't really,
plot-wise.
if you look at the rules committee, the last rules committee on it, it's not looking too favorable.
No, it's not.
But,
So with that, that's a quick summary of all the bills. And again, we'll circle back to these and add some more color and have a private discussion with dialogue once the public portion of the meeting is concluded. But with that, I think I'll throw it over to you, Allison, to take us through events coming up, and then we'll flip the camera off and talk a little more personally.
Tomorrow we have Can of Friends, which is at a new venue, the Clarendon Hotel in downtown Phoenix, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's in downtown Phoenix.
Yep.
Clarendon and Scottsdale.
No, it's
No.
Phoenix.
Is
Phoenix,
it?
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
the Mita one. That's in.
Mita's in
Oh.
Scottsdale.
Oh, I thought the Clarendon was in Scottsdale.
And
my
then we
bad.
have the Earl Cup this weekend.
Oh, cool.
Who's going to Earl Cup? I want to see a show of hands. There we go. I'm seeing lots of hands. I like it.
And then
Where?
after that, I think we kind of have a break for. Oh no, we have Mita coming up, and Mita does have a golf coming up in April that we should try to focus on so we can kick some ass.
Maybe Dimitri keeps trying to get me to give him money for it.
What?
I don't want to do not for normal.
Oh, okay. And then, yeah, that's about where we're at.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right to me too. So let's go ahead and turn the recording off, and we'll have just a little bit of a private Q&A to get a little bit more into the weeds, so to speak, on all these bills.
Cool.
And